Ahoy there, Junior Rangers. Good to see you again. Once more, this is Joseph coming to you from Seacliff State Beach, one of about 280 California state parks. Here in the great state of California, we are lucky to have so many state parks that we can share with people from around the world. I'm fortunate I get to work at many of them. We'll be talking about two of them today, at least. But this is home for me. I'm usually here at Seacliff State Beach, which means that I spend a lot of time staring at and talking about this thing out here. And if you've joined us over the last several weeks, which many of you have, thank you, we've kind of danced around this thing, and by now you know what it is, and you might know what it's made of. You tuned in last week, you have a really good idea of how it floats, but we've never really addressed why it's here in any great detail. Well, today is finally the day. We're finally going to talk all about the ship the whole time we're together. So for the next 25, 30 minutes or so, it's going to be all about that ship, because this ship shows us that while things may not work out as we planned, they may still work out just fine. So to understand what's going on with this ship, we have to think about what the world was like a bit over 100 years ago. And a bit over 100 years ago, some things in the world were different, of course. I mean, this is when the oldest people alive today, probably older than your great-grandparents, but the very oldest people alive today were around the time that they were born, just over 100 years ago. That is when this ship was born. We'll see its birthday picture in a little bit. But if you go back just a little bit before that, so from 2020, we go back 100 years, 1920. If you go into the 19 teens, we start to see some things that are not so different from our world today. People had cars, people had airplanes, people had cameras. We had radios. So there are a number of things that people from then would recognize today. Of course, the world was different, but two ways in which the world was the same, which we really wish it wasn't, where there are a lot of people all around the world who were very angry with each other. And there was a pandemic going on. So you'll see people walking along when we have the view out the window, and you'll see if they're ever near anybody else. If they're doing it right, they've got their mask on. And if you come to see us, or if you come to some other park near you, we ask you to try to stay away from other people. And if you're ever anywhere near anybody else, you put your mask on so that we can stop the spread of this disease. Well, the same thing was happening a bit over 100 years ago. Back then, it was called the Spanish flu. There were some other names for it too. That's usually what they call it. These days it's the coronavirus, but they were having to do some of the same things then that we are doing now to stop the spread of the disease. And as you can see, we eventually put Spanish flu behind us. We'll put coronavirus behind us too. Thank you, people in the United Kingdom, for getting to work on a treatment. So what does any of this have to do with that ship out there? It's mostly the war part, everybody being angry at each other around the world. And if you've heard about people, if you've heard about war, if you've heard about people at war, some people say it's really wasteful, it's really destructive. Of course, lots of people die in wars, and sometimes it's not even the people fighting that die in wars. And so some people think war is they will tell you the war is kind of dumb. Well, if wars are dumb, and sometimes people think we've got great reasons for fighting them, otherwise we wouldn't do it. But this one, it's really hard to know what they were fighting. But it was called the World War, or at the time, and in England, they still usually call it the Great War. Apparently, it was so great, we'd have to fight it again 20 years later, and that's why looking back in history now, there's a World War I, and there's a World War II. We are going back to when the First World War happened. And because it was the First World War, we'd never seen so much fighting happening for the same reason all around the world all at the same time. This is just over 100 years ago. Remember, back then, they had a lot of the same things we have now. This isn't, knights charging on horses and stuff. 100 years ago, it's cars and trucks and trains and planes. And it's the first time we see many of those things on the battlefield, and machine guns and all kinds of really destructive, mechanized, nasty stuff. Perhaps the biggest, nastiest mechanized thing that they had was a type of ship, even bigger than this one out here. You can think of a ship as big as the pier out there. They had ships back then called battleships. And a battleship is exactly what it sounds like. It's a huge ship with huge guns on it for blowing stuff up. And the whole thing is made of the strongest metal that people could get together in that amount, which is steel. And if you were anybody, because remember, the whole world, almost every country is involved somehow. There's fighting in Europe, there's fighting in Africa, there's fighting in Asian islands. It's such a mess. They tried to bring the fighting over here. And countries from all over the world were involved. So what a mess. Everybody who wants to show that they're kind of a big shot, they're powerful on the world stage, they had to have battleships. And so that means that Turkey's got them, and China's got them, and Japan's got them, and England's got them, and France has got them, and Canada's got them, and we got them, and Germany's got them, and France has got them. And every battleship is literally made out of tons and tons of steel. They're bigger even than our ship out here. They have guns on them so big, somebody like me, and remember, I'm kind of a big guy, you could sit on them like a horse, and the barrel will be sticking out into the next room here. And those guns shoot chunks of steel, giant bullets, a ton of steel every time they fire a shot from a single gun. There's so much fighting going on in so many places, between so many people in so many countries. They start to wonder, are we going to run out of steel? We've never done this before. It is, as we now know, the First World War. Do we have to build everything out of steel? Do we have to build all our ships out of steel? And there's one country, and I mentioned it before, I am a significant part Norwegian. Norway was one country that didn't do a whole lot in this. Tried to stay out of it and mostly managed to. But Norwegians have been building ships for a long time. We made people a bit grumpy during something called the Viking Age, when many of our people went and took ships and raided other people. So we've been building ships for a long time, and Norway is still building ships 100 years ago. A Norwegian guy that we mentioned before, Nikolai Holmer, he says you can build, the ship's not going to get shot at. Why don't you build it out of concrete, like your tanker ships that move fuel around? Build it out of concrete. And that's the same stuff that sidewalks are made of. Now, if you were with me last week, you know you can build a ship out of anything. If it's watertight and you build it the right shape, it will float. But even so, people have a hard time believing it. Even today, people are like, it really floats? Sure it did. But people said to Mr. Nikolai back then, Norwegian guy, you're crazy. Crazy like a fox. Norwegian guy builds a concrete ship, it floats, and then suddenly everybody has to have them. Oh, we all need concrete ships. So let's start building them. So in this country, that's from the president on down. The president at that time was Woodrow Wilson, and Woodrow Wilson is telling everybody, we need to build concrete ships. We need the money to do it. We need the places to do it. We need the people who know what they're doing. We need to start building them on the East Coast. We need to start building them on the West Coast. Build us a bunch of concrete ships. There's a war going on. And so they get ready, and they're picking sites. They're going to build them in a few places. One of them is San Francisco Bay, just over the hill from where we are now. That way. All right, so we're going to build them in San Francisco Bay. We're going to build them on the East Coast and the West Coast. We've got our sites picked out. We've got the money ready. We're making plans. We're getting the site ready. They stop fighting, but we haven't actually built the ships yet. Yeah, but you know what? We've been fighting for 4 years. We've never had a war like this before. Probably a good chance we're still going to need these ships. Let's go ahead and make them anyway. And so they start making concrete ships. And the first one to come out of San Francisco Bay is called the SS Palo Alto. That's what it looks like now. Let's take you on a walk through the visitor center to show you the ship on its birthday. You'll see as you walk around here, all kinds of pictures of the ship. We'll look at some of them more carefully later. People love it. They paint it. But I want you to see the first picture of the completed ship, and it's right over here. So here we are. I'm going to try to sit really still. It's a good thing I've got a tripod. All right. We think that special round window, it's called a porthole. We think that is from the ship. but somebody wasn't keeping track of records, so we'll never know for sure. All right, if you can see that, here's the ship the moment it was born. And if you look down here, you'll see it says 7,500-ton concrete ship Palo Alto, launched in Oakland, California. There's a special little island called Government Island between the towns of Oakland and Alameda. I know that because I used to live there. And the date is May 29th, 1919. So we've already had May 29th in 2020. If you subtract 1919 from 2020, you get 101. The ship is now 101 years old. This is what it looked like when it was 0. It's a baby ship. Hi, ship. And look at the big wave it made when they launched it. It quite literally made a splash when it entered the waters of San Francisco Bay. The reason for that, I'm going to turn your camera around now so that I can see you. And you, well, I can sort of see you, but you can see me anyway. So there's our ship. There's me. Good to see you again. So the reason it makes this big splash, not a literal splash, not even a metaphorical splash, was even though we'd known for a few years by this time that a concrete ship is a perfectly good thing. Concrete's perfectly good for making ships. They still kind of didn't trust it. Ordinarily, they would let a ship in from one end and just kind of let it slide in the water. And this time they're like, yeah, let's drop it in sideways. It's a splash, and it sends a tsunami over to Alameda and Oakland. All right, well, it made quite an entrance. They busted a bottle of champagne. A woman busted a bottle of champagne across the side, and they said, all right, here it is, finally, the first concrete ship on the West Coast. And remember just how badly everybody had to have them just 6 months ago. All right, who wants a concrete ship? Because now that there's not a war going, it's for sale. Nobody wanted a concrete ship. Just 6 months before, everybody from the president on down said, we need a concrete ship. We finally get one, and they can't even give it away. There's a lot of that. And people, well, maybe, well, give it some time. They give it more than a year. Nobody seems to want it. And then they say, well, maybe we just need to, people just need to see it do its thing. What if we showed them it really worked? Because remember, 100 years ago, we've got great big ships, we've got airplanes, we got trains, we have cameras. And that means people could take photographs of the ship. If you look really carefully, right there, do you see the name? Palo Alto. That's our ship. There's smoke coming out of the smokestack. There's water coming out of the hull. And remember, if you were with me last week, many big ships will take on water on purpose. They're supposed to do that. It helps them float at just the right kind of depth and height above the water. So there you go. It totally works. Who wants a concrete ship? Surely somebody must want a concrete ship. Look how beautifully it glides across San Francisco Bay. They took it on this short little trip across San Francisco Bay and back. Who wants a concrete ship in 1921 now? Nobody. Nobody. So what is going to become of our concrete ship? It was meant to be a non-combat ship in a war, but it was too late for the war. It sits around in different parts of San Francisco Bay for 10 years with people selling parts off of it here and there. I think the propeller ended up going to Germany. Somebody said something's got to happen. It ends up here at Seacliff, right? So we know something happens to it. They're just as they're starting to wonder, I think, is this thing just going to rot right where we launched it? Along comes 1929. After the First World War, some new fun things happen in the world. You get to have a little something called the Jazz Age. I dance for you, except that it'd be hard to show you, and it's not one of my most developed skills, shall we say. But look at that. We have jazz bands. You know, we got a fun old microphone over here. Gives you some idea where this might be headed. So Right? And I'm trying to get the light out of your face. Let's see here. Ah, almost. Good enough. Here, I'll block it with my giant head. So 1929, the world has changed a bit. There's a new type of music, which has really taken the world by storm, comes out of America, and it's called jazz. And people are dancing to jazz, and they call it the jazz age. And it's a time with wild parties. Some people, mostly people who are already rich, are making a lot of money. But it seems like after the war, well, man, we're finally having a good time again. Our pandemic that they had then had passed. The war was over. The world was rebuilding. People were making money, especially the people who already had a bunch. But it seems like a good time. And people start spending a little bit less of their life working and a bit more of their life having fun. And so these coastal vacation homes in California start popping up. And, in Southern California, we got warm weather. Oh boy, all right, let's do that. We still see people doing that. But people did that in Northern California too. We're kind of Central California here. People start saying, well, why don't we, I'll just take you off the tripod. Why don't we start making some resorts? These are places that people can, visit for fun, and they can stay a while. We can do one here at Seacliff, and they're doing them all over Monterey Bay. Santa Cruz to this day, famous resort town. Monterey and Pacific Grove at the other end of the bay, sure. And so here in Seacliff, though, we don't have much of a town in 1925, do we? By 1929, there wasn't a whole lot more. If you see that stream right in the middle, I am talking to you from right where that comes out. There was no building there at that time. There weren't very many buildings up on top of the cliff. There wasn't a whole lot here. What were they going to get people to come for? Yes, there's a nice beach. There's a great beach, but there are great beaches all over the place around here. Why would they come to Seacliff instead? And somebody got a wild idea, a wild and crazy jazz age idea. They said, why don't we take our ship and make it into a party ship? So once again, we've got plans for the ship. This is what those plans looked like. Here's what's called a scale model. The actual ship is 434 feet and I believe 4 inches long. This isn't anywhere near that big. It's a little bit longer than my arm. I'm going to turn you around so I can see what I'm showing you. There we are again. So it's about as long as my arm, right? But all the people on it, if you look carefully, you see little tiny people on it. There's little tiny cars. When I was a kid, there were toy cars called micro machines, and I think that's what they used. There's those old-timey cars over there. So you get an idea just how big the ship and pier are from looking at our scale model. And if you look behind it, you'll see the plans. Why they built all this stuff. Remember, the concrete is just the gray part at the bottom there. All this other stuff they were going to add once they brought the ship here. And by then, most of the machinery was gone. The propeller, I think, again, to Germany. Engine parts sold here and there. They just wanted to bring the ship out here. They were going to use it like a platform, kind of an extension of the pier out into the water. It wasn't even going to float. They were bringing it here and they were going to sink it because people were going to come to the ship. The ship wasn't going to go anywhere. So they thought, why don't we sink it? Because we've got big plans. Turn you around again. Hope you're not getting dizzy. We got big plans. We want to build, here's the plan behind it, an arcade where people can play games just like we play games in arcades when there's not a pandemic going on. That's pretty. There we go. There's a kitchen. Why would there be a kitchen on a concrete ship? Because right next door, there's a restaurant. There's a fountain where you get a fancy new drink called soda there. Depending where you're coming from, maybe that's called pop. Soda pop. There's a ballroom for dancing, and there are even plans, at least, for a swimming pool in the bottom. So they were going to build all this stuff, and people would come to party on it, and they'd pay money to do it. And so that was their brilliant idea. It's like, hey, we'll get rich by giving people a reason to come to Seacliff, something they'll have there that they won't have anywhere else. We'll have a party ship. And we'll have a brand new neon sign. Those flashing signs that we see at night were brand new at this time, which is 1929, over 90 years ago. And we're going to have a clever name for our attraction. We're going to make that neon sign. We're going to put it on the old road up where the highway is in present day. We're going to build the neon sign, give our attraction a clever name. We're going to call it, are you ready? The Ship. They went through all the trouble of making a neon sign and all this, and that was the best name they could come up with. I'm sure we junior rangers could probably get together for maybe 10 minutes and come up with a much cleverer name, but that's what they called it. And they said, you know what? It's probably going to work. We will open for business in the summer of 1930. And we'll have people come out. We'll charge them to come on board. We'll have them buy food in the restaurant. And we'll make a ton of money. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Well, as you may have learned by now, the Palo Alto was a bit late for the war that it was built for. Turns out it's a bit late for the jazz age, too. Because by the time they were making their plans in 1929. By the time 1930 rolls around, the rich people, everybody, a lot of people don't have jobs. A lot of people aren't making any money. People had been investing, which is giving money to businesses. And then the business goes and they do whatever they do to make a whole bunch of money. And then they give you more of that money back because it helps them make the money they need. So people were helping businesses get started and then they would get paid more later. Except the businesses weren't working. All kinds of things go wrong, and the world enters what we now call the Great Depression. A lot of people don't have jobs. A lot of people don't have money. It's a hard time for almost everybody around the world. What do you think? If it's a hard time everywhere around the world, you don't have a job, your family doesn't have money, are you going to go party on a concrete ship? Well, maybe you won't. Maybe you think, well, I don't have that kind of money. I can't do that. Maybe you have at least a little bit of money still. And you say, I really need something to be happy about with all that's going wrong in the world. Maybe I do need to go party on a ship. But as happened with the ship in the war, it's like, you know what? We already made our plans. We already spent our money. It cost over $1 million to build the ship. Only cost a few $1,000s to build it down, to bring it down here. So the ship is already worth a fraction of what it was, what we paid to build it. Let's bring it on down. We'll go ahead and go through with our plan. Maybe this is just what people need in the Great Depression. So what does it look like when they open up for January or for business in the summer of 1930? June 1930, again, we think these windows, these portholes come from the ship. We're not absolutely sure, but it certainly had windows like this. This, we know, is the actual helm, the steering wheel from the ship. It had these lovely lanterns on it to light your way when it was dark. It had big, heavy iron doors. That wooden disc down there is from the top of the masts, those big poles sticking up off the deck. But remember, it's not just a ship anymore. It's a place where we can party. In the Rainbow Ballroom, you could dance to the music of Ed Rookledge and his famous 10-piece orchestra. There were other bands that filmed out there, but we had a really good photograph of this, so we rebuilt the sign to put here. And of course, you get your tickets, you're going to pay money for your ticket, right? Aha. So this is a good plan. And then maybe you go listening to music and dancing. Maybe before you get to that, though, you go to the restaurant. Here's the dining room in the restaurant. And you sit down. You see, and have some tea. We'll put some lovely flowers at your table. Bring you a lovely dinner. Restaurant, at least at one time, was called the Fish Palace. So you can imagine what people might eat out there. But remember, they made a real point of sinking the ship. They did it carefully. They did it on purpose. You remember how, if you were with us last week, how you put too much water in a ship that floats and it's going to sink. Well, that's what they did, but they did it on purpose. They put it in really slowly. And they built the pier out to the ship. I'll show you that. Here's what it looked like when they brought the ship here. All right, so this is in January of 1930. The Great Depression has just begun, but they don't necessarily know that yet. So they're building the pier, and you see there's a smaller boat called a tugboat that's bringing it to the pier. When the pier is completed, they sink the ship at the end of it by opening what are called seacocks, which are just, where they let the water in on purpose. But instead of letting in just enough water that it floats correctly, they let in water until it's sitting on the bottom. But the ship is big enough that the decks are still above water. And so what does it look like when it's ready for business in June of 1930? It looks like this. And look at that. Look at all those old-timey cars. You can see people out there. Look at all the people out there. Seems like maybe this was exactly what they needed. And so they have a very busy summer in 1930. They're dancing and eating, having a good time. Maybe this was just what people needed in this hard time. Let's do it again next year. So they close up shop for the winter, which goes from 1930 into 1931. And they're getting ready to do it next year. Now, the thing is, while they're doing that, in other parts of California, people get some ideas that seem a little funny today. You get places like Malibu down south, Stinson Beach up north. I don't mean to pick on people in other areas, Privates Beach around here. That name right there tells you something. The people living by those places started thinking, we don't want everybody else here. This is our beach. And they just started telling people that, you can't come here. This is a private beach. You're going to have to leave. Sorry. Now, that sounds funny to us today because really the whole coast of California belongs to all Californians forever. And that was true even before I was born. But back in 1930, we didn't know for sure if that was going to happen. Maybe a bunch of rich people will buy all the beaches. And if the rest of us want to see it, if they'll let us, we'll have to pay them a whole bunch of money to do it. We didn't know. So in 1930, the state of California decides that we are going to make sure at least some of the California coast is for all Californians for all time. And guess where it started? The very first California State Beach is right out our window. And it has a party ship on it. Woohoo! So there you go. 90 years ago, that was a party ship. You see people having fun on the beach even today. Junior Rangers, here's California's first state beach right here at Seacliff. It was us, and then the other one, at the same time, hard to see, but if you look past our lifeguard tower, you see where those fishing boats are out there. There's another beach right in the middle of Monterey Bay called Sunset State Beach. I also work there. And those beaches belong to all Californians forever. They are California's first state beaches. So what does that mean for our friends running their amusement park on the ship? Well, now it's not just the ship, right? It's the ship at Seacliff State Beach. Oh, so they are ready to have a very good time in 1931. And they do. Once again, looks just like that. Cars all up and down the pier, people all over the deck of the ship, dancing, eating, and we have no photographs, but we believe they were even swimming inside the ship. It's supposed to have a swimming pool down at the bottom. So after 1931, it's like, apparently we've hit on something. This is just what people needed to get through this tough time. Great, let's keep doing it summer after summer. But it's between 1931 and 1932 that they learned their mistake. Kind of two mistakes. One they couldn't know was that this Great Depression was going to go on for about 10 years. It's hard to start anything at the beginning of that. The other thing was they sunk the ship. And yes, if you sink the ship, great. If you're in the dining room and you've got your spaghetti rolled up on your fork and a big wave hits, instead of going to your mouth, it doesn't go to your eye because there's no big wave making the ship roll around, right? Doesn't throw off your dance moves on the dance floor. Seemed like a great idea to put the ship on the ocean floor so that it would sit still. But how many waves have been hitting the ship just in the time that we've been talking? Have a quick peek outside. All right. You can hear the waves. 1. So that's how long it takes a wave to roll in. How many waves have hit the ship just in the time that we've been talking? Probably a few hundred. Every single wave, big ones, little ones, and we get big ones, is grinding that ship into the ocean floor. If it was floating, it would just go up and down. And the other ships they built at the same time. The next one is called the SS Palo Alto, still floating all in one piece up in Canada. It's over 100 years old now. Wow. But if every wave, big or small, is grinding it into the ocean floor, it's going to break. The first break in the ship happens in the winter of 1931, 1932. They get a stormy winter, and right there, that far end of the ship, we say it's forever facing south. That's Monterey over there. Hi, Monterey. That's called the bow. The front of the ship is over here. The front of the ship is pointed away from us. The bow, there's a crack between the bow and the rest of the ship. This is a problem in more ways than one. So we got a crack in the ship. How do we fix it? What does it look like when a storm hits the ship? Here's what it looked like when I was a little kid. Look at that. Waves breaking over the deck. So this is the kind of thing we get in the winter. So it's going to have to survive that. Just won't do it if it's on the ocean floor. So the big waves come along, they smash it. So they don't even know how to fix it. Like, how do you fix a ship that's sitting on the ocean floor made of concrete? Because usually when you fix a ship, you get it up out of the water to fix it. Well, even if they could think of a way, they didn't have any way to pay for it. As popular as the ship was, people were paying money to go out there. It wasn't paying for the costs to run the business. They weren't making any money, even though people liked it. They weren't making any money. They couldn't pay anybody to fix it. And they, not only could they not fix it, they couldn't keep doing the party ship anymore. So they had to give up. Oh, no. So now, what does this mean? We have a broken, abandoned concrete ship at the end of the pier at our brand new State Beach. There's about 4 or 5 years of this, where everybody's like, well, what do we do? And finally, California says to the person who owned it at the end, look, we'll give you $1 for that concrete ship. And the owner said, thank you, took the $1, because now it was the state's problem. Oh no, so we have a broken concrete ship off the end of the pier and our brand new, glorious, inaugural State Beach. All right, I guess we'll see how this works. Now remember, look at that. Hey. People were figured out right away when it was still a party ship, the fishing was very good off the size of the boat. That right there, that's a halibut. I've caught one of those, but never one quite as big as that. Here, let's stand me next to that so you can see how big. Remember, I'm kind of a big guy. I'm about 6 feet tall. You can catch big fish from that ship. Usually to catch fish this big, you'd have to go out on a boat, taking that boat out on top of the water. But if you could just walk onto a boat that's big enough to far enough out of the water, that means you can just walk from your car to deep sea fishing for big fish. And state parks, bed fishing is part of what we do, and anywhere there's enough water and fish to do it from the beginning. And so people say, hey, you know what? This is a fishing pier unlike anything else in California. We've got piers made of wood. We've got piers made of concrete. But we don't have piers made of wood and a concrete ship. There's nothing quite like being out on a ship. And that's another thing. Even if we weren't fishing, they found out that, we, state parks, we're not a business. We're not trying to make money. We just want to help people have a good time and take care of special places. We didn't have to worry about making money out of there. We just had to make sure that people could get out there safely and enjoy it. And so that's what we did. We decided, you know what, go ahead and we'll put some big picnic tables out there. You can fish off the side. Have fun. Don't do anything crazy. And for 70 years, that's what people did. A lot of fishing, picnicking, and just, you come from Stockton in the middle of summer, it's 110 degrees back home. You get here, it's, maybe 60 degrees, and you walk out on a concrete ship. There's just nothing like it on the coast of California. And so people came here just kind of for the spectacle, it's called. There's nothing quite like it. It's a unique experience. And over the next 70 years, this becomes kind of a symbol of Aptos, the town we're in, and northern end of Monterey Bay. So why don't we still go out there? Well, you've had a look at it, haven't you? Let's take another look. You can see why we don't go out there today. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, I were to allow it. I can't allow you to go out there, but let's just say I did. You couldn't stand on it. Unless you're a bird, you just can't go on the ship. You literally cannot. It won't work. Well, yeah. What happened is the ship started breaking up because, again, when it's on the ocean floor, every wave is going to damage it. Waves are rolling in every few seconds, day and night. Remember what those storm waves looked like. That storm I showed you, which was from when I was a little kid, I was not even junior ranger age yet. I was just 2 years old. I'll be 40 in a few months. Those storms look like this. This is from the year 1983. And that was the year when they thought they were going to have to close the ship. But we've done a little bit of math today. You could walk on the ship from 1930, and then I said you could walk out there for about 70 years, which would mean you could walk on the ship until the year 2000 at least, if you're doing your math right. Huh. So what happens between 1983 and 2000? It looks like the ship was almost totally destroyed back then. Well, there was a woman by the name of Rose Costa. Rose was a fisherwoman. And Rose, one season, caught over 50 salmon. Remember those big fish over there? She caught over 50 of them. Rose really liked fishing from the ship. She loved fishing from the ship. And when in the early 1980s, it looked like we would have to close the ship because it wasn't safe anymore, it was falling apart, Rose said to us, what if I could get people to fix the ship for free? Volunteers, they're called, people who will give their time and their effort to make good things happen. Rose got whichever volunteer she could. She got scout troops, church groups, you name it. Got them all together, and around that time, 1983, people put in over 7,000 hours of volunteer work to make sure the pier and the ship were safe enough that people could go out on it. And because all those people gave up so much time and so much work, they took something that looked like this and turned it into something that you could still walk on. Now, it was kind of a mess still. But back in the 1980s and 1990s, you could still go out there and it looked something like this. So there's the end of the pier. You now have to step down to it, right? There's those big picnic tables out there. You could only go halfway out. You see there's a fence there. And you can see why you can only go halfway out. The part that busted off in 1932, that crack was underwater most of the time. By 1963, this half of the ship, you really couldn't go out there at all. But because of all the work they put in, there were another 17 years, thanks to what volunteers did. Now, as you know, you can't walk out there now. By the year 2001, it was so far gone that we couldn't let people out there at all. And in the last few years, when California finally came out of its years-long drought, we had some big winter storms, and we had that near end of the ship bust off and turn sideways a little bit one year. And we're like, oh, wow, what's going to happen? Well, the next year we got our answer. January 21st, 2017. the ship turned into this. That near end, the stern, which is the back of the ship, turned completely over on its side. And from now on, it's going to look more and more like an island and less like a ship. And that means that it is now home for the fish that swim in and out of it, the animals that cling to life beside it. A couple webinars ago, we visited them. The birds, you probably won't see shearwaters on it, but our other birds will come and visit it, nest on it. It's covered in cormorant nests right now. And there's nothing like it in the middle of Monterey Bay. This is the only place where a bird can build a nest on a rocky thing in the middle of the bay, or a fish can swim around in something like rocks, or these animals that are attached to rocks can live. If it weren't for the ship, they would have to go up to Pleasure Point, all the way down to Monterey, which we cannot even see today for the fog. So the ship might not have ever really done what it was supposed to do. But to this day, people love it and come to visit it from around the world. So I guess it turned out okay. Sometimes even if things don't go the way we planned, they turn out just fine. The Palo Alto shows us that every day. So, as you see, I can talk about this ship, but I think we're going to go ahead and be done with that. I'm going to check your questions, and then we'll do the Junior Ranger Pledge. Thank you for your patience. So what do we have down here? All right, so the fort and flagpole are still there, says Brody. And Edith, I think we asked about this. My mom said she went on the boat when she was younger, and a couple of visits ago, somebody asked, my mom said she went on the boat. Was she telling the truth? I can't tell you she's telling the truth. I can only tell you that if she's more than 20 years old, as you now know, she could have. All right, and see, Jameson's got a hand up. Let me see if I can. All right, if you think of it, say it. If you don't think of it, you're going to get an email from me with your digital badge stamp, and you can respond to that and ask me any questions that you thought of that we didn't get to today. You can do that with all of these. So let's get you that digital badge stamp. There's only one more thing we need to do, and that is to, once again, either recite for the first time or reaffirm our Junior Ranger Pledge. I always read it to make sure I get it just right, so I'm going to grab my text and be right with you. Remember, this is a repeat after me thing. I will say something, and you will say just exactly what I say with one exception. When I say state your name, don't say state your name. State your name. And if I were a Junior Ranger, I'd say I, Joseph Carr Ritchie, not I state my name. You're going to say your name in that part. Otherwise, just say what I say, and then do what it says, and you are Junior Ranger material. Ready? I state your name. Promise to treat the earth and all living things with care and respect. Be careful of what I do and how it affects others. Here's an example. And learn about the importance of nature and our heritage. If you can do all that, you're a Junior Ranger. I'll be sending you your digital badge stamp shortly. I see some volunteers of mine out on the deck, and I would like to say hello to them. So that means I'm going to have to say goodbye to you unless you've thought of any new questions. Not yet. Okay, well, if you think of any, reply to that email. When you get your digital badge stamp, it'll be later today or maybe tomorrow. Reply to that, and I will do my best to answer them. I think one question did get in. Let's answer it. Oh, bye, says anonymous attendee. Well, that works too. All right, thanks a whole bunch for tuning in, everybody. Next week, we're going to look into Monterey Bay itself. Hope you'll join us then. Bye for now.